Welcome to today's Explainer. Get ready because today we're looking at one of the most incredibly satisfying engineering journeys in the entire modern tech world. The seamless path of getting code from a single developer's laptop to literally millions of users. If you're the kind of person who loves to unpack how the digital world actually functions behind the scenes, well, you're in the exact right place. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's jump right in. So think about this for a second. How does a developer write some code on their laptop, and then, just a few hours later, that exact same code is running perfectly for millions of people around the globe? What's really fascinating here is that when this process is done right, a human barely even touches the code along the way. It's almost entirely invisible to us as everyday users, but honestly, it is absolute engineering magic. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The stressful old way. Manual deployments. To truly appreciate the absolute genius of the modern system, you kind of have to imagine the sheer tension in the room when an old update went live. Picture the reality of this old way. A developer finishes up their code, manually copies the files over to a live server by hand, hits restart, and essentially just holds their breath and hopes nothing breaks. And when things inevitably did go wrong, the whole website went down, and everybody just panicked, trying to fix it under immense pressure. It was slow, it was incredibly stressful, and honestly super risky. It was just way too easy to make a tiny little mistake that took the whole site offline. Now contrast that with the modern way. We've completely replaced that terrifying, hope for the best method with an automated, totally repeatable pipeline. Which brings us to Section 2, the code assembly line, automating the journey. You can think of this pipeline exactly like a highly efficient physical assembly line in a massive manufacturing plant, but, built entirely for digital code. There are 5 main stations on our digital assembly line. Step 1 is the push. That's when a developer pushes their code to a shared repository, like GitHub, for example. And here is a totally critical detail to remember. Pushing that code is the absolute last manual step a human takes. I mean it. Everything from step 2 through step 5. Testing, packaging, staging, and production is entirely automatic. Once that developer hits push, the machine completely takes over the journey. So let's zoom in on step 2, which really acts as our ultimate safety net. The very moment that code is pushed, the pipeline automatically triggers hundreds of checks. It's basically asking, hey, does this new code actually work? Did it accidentally break something that used to work fine? And here's the kicker. If even a single test fails here, the code changes are rejected instantly. Boom, done. It is stopped cold before it ever gets anywhere near a real user. Now, when those tests actually do pass, we move on to step 3, which is packaging the code into what's called a container image. Think of this as a completely sealed box. It contains the application and absolutely everything that application needs to run successfully. What's really interesting about this concept is how sealing it all up together inside this container guarantees that the code behaves consistently. It runs exactly the same way no matter where it eventually lands. Right after that, that sealed box is sent over to step 4, the staging environment. This staging area is a perfect, exact copy of the real environment. It acts as a high-fidelity simulation where the engineering team can observe exactly how the application changes are going to behave out in the real world. But the big takeaway here is that actual users never see the staging area. Nope, it is strictly a testing ground, basically a final dress rehearsal to prepare for the real thing. That takes us to Section 3, the 10% rule. Deploying to production. Deploying to production is the main event, right? It's the real environment your users actually interact with. But engineers use this brilliant risk management strategy to do this safely. And this brilliantly illustrates how smart teams operate. When there's already a previous version of an app running, they don't just flip the switch and give the new code to everybody all at once. No way. Instead, they release the new version to just a tiny fraction of their users, usually around 10%. Meanwhile, the vast majority, the remaining 90%, just continue happily interacting with the old, stable version. So why only 10%? Well, you simply cannot possibly test everything beforehand. It doesn't matter how rigorous your safety net is or how many stages you've set up. If a bug still manages to somehow slip through, this strategy drastically limits the impact. Only 10% of users are affected, keeping the other 90% perfectly safe. Plus, this gives the team an immediate undo button. They can sit back, carefully observe the new version for a few hours, and if anything looks even slightly off, they instantly roll it back to the previous version. Assuming everything looks totally fine in that 10% rollout, well, then the code is confidently released to everyone else. Moving into our final part, Section 4, Why Boring is Beautiful, Decoding the Jargon. All right, so what is the actual technical name for this incredible system we've been talking about? The industry term for this entire assembly line is CI/CD. CI stands for continuous integration. That's the automatic testing part that fires off every single time the code changes. CD stands for continuous deployment or delivery, which is the automatic delivery of those tested changes directly to the users. Building and maintaining this massive automated pipeline is a huge part of what DevOps engineers do every single day. And this entire CI/CD pipeline exists to achieve one incredibly simple goal. Boring is exactly what you want. I know, it sounds a little counterintuitive, right? But think about it. When millions of people are actively using your app, excitement during a software update is usually a really bad thing. Excitement usually means things are breaking, alarms are going off, and people are panicking. You want predictable outcomes, you want smooth transitions, and absolutely zero surprises. To sum up this ultimate DevOps goal, just look back at the journey. Push, test, package, stage, and produce. It happens completely automatically, often many, many times a day. It takes what used to be a terrifying manual all-hands-on-deck event and transforms it into a constantly updating, repeatable, and, yes, beautifully boring process. It gives you a safety net at literally every single step, complete with that crucial undo button at the end. It's the exact reason why companies can constantly ship updates without causing a massive mess for their entire user base. So the crucial takeaway from this explainer is the sheer scale and reliability of this hidden automation. I want to leave you with this question to chew on. How many of these boring pipelines are running your favorite apps right now? Every single time you refresh your feed, use a new feature, or open up an app on your phone, remember that invisible, beautifully engineered assembly line working flawlessly in the background to bring that code right to your screen. Thanks for joining me today, and I really hope this gave you a fresh, structured perspective on the absolute magic of software delivery.